24 young men, a fake prison built in a basement. 6 days in, it had to be shut down because people were breaking. For 50 years, this was taught as proof of something terrifying, that any of us, given a uniform and a little power, will become a monster. It became one of the most famous psychology experiments ever run, except the story you've heard about it isn't what actually happened. In 1971, a psychologist at Stanford named Philip Zimbardo recruited college students for a 2-week study. Half were randomly assigned to be guards, half to be prisoners, in a fake jail built in the basement of the psychology building. No training, no script, just roles, uniforms, and a basement. Within days, the guards were allegedly humiliating prisoners, forced exercise, sleep deprivation, degrading punishments. Prisoners had breakdowns. The study was called off after 6 days instead of 2 weeks. The lesson, repeated in textbooks for 2 generations. Ordinary people don't need to be evil to do evil things. Just hand them power and a uniform, and the situation does the rest. Zimbardo didn't just run the study, he narrated it. He played the prison superintendent himself. He gave interviews. He testified before Congress. The experiment appeared in Psychology 101 courses worldwide, inspired films, and became shorthand for explaining real atrocities. Abu Ghraib, in particular, was compared to it directly. One guard, remembered only as John Wayne, became infamous for inventing cruel routines on his own initiative. Proof, it seemed, that evil emerges naturally once the right conditions exist. It felt like undeniable evidence about human nature itself. For decades, almost no one asked a basic question. Was this actually a controlled experiment, or was it theater? In 2018, a French researcher named Thibault Le Texier spent years combing through Zimbardo's original archived audio tapes, notes, and interviews, material that had sat largely unexamined in Stanford's library for over 40 years. What he found didn't match the legend. The guards hadn't spontaneously turned cruel. On the tapes, you can hear a staff member directly coaching them beforehand, telling them to be tough, to create a sense of powerlessness in the prisoners. John Wayne, the guard everyone cited as proof of natural cruelty, later admitted in interviews that he was consciously performing, doing an impression of a character from the film Cool Hand Luke, trying to help the study produce an interesting result. And the prisoners weren't spontaneously breaking down either. One of the most cited breakdowns, a participant screaming that he was burning up inside, happened after he learned his parole request had been denied, and later said in an interview that he faked the breakdown to get released early because he was allowed to keep studying for his exams in his cell and wanted out. Participants weren't anonymous test subjects reacting naturally. They were college students who knew they were being watched, who picked up on what the researchers seemed to want, and who, consciously or not, gave it to them. This isn't some obscure detail. It's called a demand characteristic, and it's one of the oldest problems in psychology. People behave differently when they know they're being studied and can guess the hypothesis. So, was the whole thing meaningless? Not exactly, but it wasn't a clean window into human nature either. It was closer to a poorly controlled improv exercise with a scientist actively directing the outcome from behind the curtain, then presenting the result as if it had emerged on its own. The real story isn't ordinary people spontaneously become cruel when given power. It's something almost more unsettling. People will often do cruel things when an authority figure they trust tells them, explicitly or subtly, that this is what's expected of them. That's a different finding, and it lines up with other, better-controlled research like Milgram's obedience studies, far more than the version taught in textbooks for 50 years. For half a century, we told this story because it let us off the hook in a strange way. If evil is just what happens automatically inside a bad system, then no one individual really has to own their choices. The situation made them do it. But the tapes tell a quieter, less comfortable version. Someone had to ask for the cruelty. Someone had to coach it into existence. And someone had to decide to go along with what they thought was expected of them. That's not a story about a switch flipping inside ordinary people. It's a story about how far people will go to please someone they trust, and how easily just doing the study can become an excuse. So the next time you hear that power alone turns people cruel, remember the tapes. It was never the uniform. It was the person standing behind the camera, quietly telling them who to become.